The Coyote tested the frozen rill because Winter had learned how to imitate certainty. The rill was narrow, no wider than a boot print in most places, a thin vein of water that slipped downhill through the meadow long after the larger creek had locked itself in ice. It ran shallow but persistent, fed by a spring higher up the slope, never quite freezing solid, never fully open either. In daylight it looked harmless, a pale ribbon stitched into snow, glazed smooth by repeated thaws and refreezes. At night, it lied. The Coyote stood at the edge where snow thinned and ice showed through, head lowered, ears angled forward but not rigid. He was mature, lean, his winter coat thick along the neck and shoulders, colour muted into grey and rust that matched the land when light was low. His tail hung relaxed, tip brushing snow, not signalling anything. Not yet. He did not step onto the ice. He waited. Cold had pressed down hard for days, but the temperature had lifted briefly that afternoon, just enough to soften what lay beneath the surface. Ice here did not fail loudly. It sagged first. It bent. It accepted weight right up until it decided it wouldn't. The Coyote sniffed. Water smell rose faintly through the ice, carried by cold air that flattened scent close to the ground. It was not strong, but it was present. That mattered. He lifted one forepaw and placed it gently on the frozen surface. The ice did not crack. It dipped. Barely. So little that only something expecting it would notice. The surface bowed under his weight, then held, tension spreading outward in a shallow, silent wave. The Coyote froze. Muscles locked, weight suspended mid-transfer, paw still pressed lightly to the ice. His pads felt the cold differently now, no longer the dead cold of solid ground, but the living cold of water restrained by a thin skin. The surface sagged again, just a fraction more. That was the answer. He withdrew his paw slowly, redistributing weight back onto snow without lifting it too quickly. The ice rose back into place, smooth and unbroken, pretending nothing had happened. The Coyote stood still for a long time afterward. Winter did this often, offered surfaces that looked finished but were still deciding. He moved upstream, following the rill without crossing it, pacing parallel where grass stems poked through snow and the ground underneath held honest resistance. His path curved gently with the land, each step placed where soil remembered how to carry weight. The meadow around him lay quiet. Sound travelled far in this cold, thin air. A distant truck passed somewhere beyond the ridge, tyres hissing briefly on frozen road. The noise flattened quickly, absorbed by open space. Closer in, nothing moved. That silence mattered more than the sound. He paused again where the rill narrowed and dipped into a shallow cut, snow bridging the gap in a soft arch. Here, the ice was hidden completely, disguised by white that looked thick enough to trust. The Coyote leaned forward and sniffed the bridge. Cold, yes, but hollow. Air moved beneath it, faint but real. He did not touch it. Instead, he stepped back and watched. A vole burst suddenly from cover near the far bank, sprinting across the snow bridge in a straight, desperate line. Its weight was too little to matter. The bridge held easily, the vole vanishing into grass beyond. The Coyote did not follow. Small bodies taught bad lessons about ice. He waited. Farther up the slope, the land changed character. The rill widened slightly, spreading into a thin sheet before narrowing again. Here, water moved slower beneath the ice, collecting heat from the earth below. The surface looked thicker, clouded, layered, but the sag would be deeper if tested. The Coyote crouched, lowering his centre of gravity, not to pounce, but to reduce load. He placed one paw on the ice again. Sag. More noticeable this time. The ice bent enough that a faint sound reached his ears. Not a crack, not a break, but a soft, wet sigh as water shifted beneath pressure. He withdrew immediately. That sound would have been invisible to most animals. To him, it was final. Above the meadow, a human figure moved along a fence line, checking posts bent by snow and wind. The man stopped occasionally, tugged at wire, then moved on. His boots crunched loudly, rhythmically, announcing each step. The coyote watched from a distance. Humans crossed rills like this without thinking, trusting boots and momentum. Sometimes the ice held. Sometimes it failed late, after weight committed fully. The man did not cross here. He stayed upslope where ground was firm, then disappeared beyond a stand of trees. The meadow relaxed slightly. The coyote returned his attention to the rill. Hunger pressed, not sharply, not yet, but present enough to require calculation. The rill marked a boundary between feeding grounds. Beyond it lay a stretch of low scrub where rabbits often sheltered. On this side, options were thinning. The coyote followed the rill until it narrowed into something closer to a crack than a channel. Here, ice thickened where flow compressed. Snow piled unevenly, creating a low ridge that pressed down and stabilized the surface beneath. He tested again. This time, the ice did not sag. He shifted more weight. Still nothing. He crossed quickly, but not hurriedly, stepping where the ridge compressed the ice, keeping momentum smooth and continuous. He did not pause mid-crossing. Pausing invited reconsideration. On the far side, he stopped immediately and turned back. The crossing point looked no different than before. It would not forgive a second mistake. As he moved into scrub, the coyote listened once more to the meadow behind him. The rill whispered quietly beneath its skin of ice, water continuing its work regardless of temperature or attention. By morning, the surface might harden enough to carry weight confidently, or it might sag farther, collapse suddenly under the wrong pressure. The coyote did not care which. He had learned what he needed. Ice did not fail when stepped on. It failed when trusted. He vanished into brush, paws finding earth again, leaving behind a rill that would look solid to the next body that came without patience. The surface had sagged. That was the warning. And he had listened before the lesson demanded more. The night did not finish freezing the meadow, it only slowed it. The coyote returned before dawn, when the sky was still star-hard and the cold pressed downward without movement. In this hour, ice felt strongest. The surface of the rill looked sealed now, its cloudy skin stiffened into something that resembled certainty. The coyote did not step onto it immediately. He moved along the far bank first, retracing his earlier path, letting memory compare itself to what his body sensed now. Cold had changed the language of the land. Snow creaked louder underfoot. Grass stems snapped instead of bending. Sound travelled farther and returned sharper, less forgiving. The rill sounded different too. Water still moved beneath the ice, but its voice had dropped. The soft sigh he had heard earlier was gone, replaced by a faint ticking, tiny contractions as ice tightened and loosened against flow. That sound meant tension, not strength. He stopped where he had crossed before. The ridge of compressed snow remained, pressed low and firm by wind and drift. Here, the ice had been forced downward, thickened unevenly, supported from above as much as below. He tested it again. This time, there was no sag. His paw rested on the surface and met resistance immediately, clean and honest. He shifted weight slowly, letting pressure build without surprise. The ice held. He crossed again, but even more quickly than before, keeping motion smooth and continuous, avoiding hesitation that would concentrate force. On the far side, he did not turn back. He moved away from the rill, angling upslope into the scrub where the ground rose and drainage improved. Here, soil stayed firmer under snow. Roots held. Stone resisted. He hunted briefly, following the faint tracks of a rabbit that had moved earlier in the night, but the trail dissolved into wind-scrubbed ground. He did not pursue it long. Energy was not abundant enough to spend on guessing. Instead, he circled back downslope as the first grey light softened the eastern edge of the sky. With daylight came deception. The sun did not warm the meadow yet. It only changed how things looked. Shadows flattened. Ice reflected pale blue and white, erasing depth. What had read as texture in darkness now smoothed into a continuous surface. The rill disappeared into the snow. This was when mistakes happened. The coyote approached from a different angle, coming downhill now, where gravity would work against him if the surface failed. He stopped several body lengths back and watched. Nothing moved, no sag, no sound, no change. He waited longer than before. Patience here was not caution, it was measurement. A gust of wind passed across the meadow, flattening snow briefly and exposing the rill's path as a faint line of darker shadow. In that moment, the coyote saw it. A subtle depression where the ice dipped even without weight, where water pressed upward from below. Not frozen solid, just held. He moved along the rill again instead of crossing, following it toward a bend where alder roots cut through the channel and disrupted flow. There, ice thickened irregularly, locked in place by wood and soil. He tested once more. No sag. He crossed for the third time, unremarkable and uneventful, as if the rill had never been a question at all. That was the most dangerous illusion of all. Farther into the day, the meadow began to wake. Birds arrived cautiously, landing on exposed grass, lifting again quickly. A raven crossed overhead, its wing beats slow and deliberate. In the distance, the same truck passed again, closer this time, engine sound carrying farther in the cold air. The coyote fed briefly on a frozen vole he uncovered beneath a drift, crunching through ice-stiff flesh, swallowing without pause. It was not much, but it was enough. As he finished, the sun finally touched the meadow. Not warmth, just light. The surface of the rill responded immediately. Ice did not melt. It loosened. Microfractures formed silently beneath the snow bridge, releasing pressure unevenly. The ticking sound returned, faint but insistent. The coyote stepped away. He did not wait to see failure. By midday, the surface would sag again. By afternoon, it might break under something heavier, something less patient, or it might hold long enough to teach the wrong lesson to the wrong animal. He moved upslope and away, choosing ground that behaved the same regardless of light. Behind him, the rill lay quiet and smooth, hidden completely now, waiting. The ice remembered heat. It always did, and it would answer accordingly when asked the wrong way. By late afternoon, the meadow no longer pretended to be frozen. It still looked the same, snow unbroken, pale light spread evenly, the rill invisible beneath its skin, but the language underneath had changed. The cold that had tightened the ice overnight had lifted just enough to undo its discipline, not melting, not breaking, softening into indecision. The coyote felt it before he reached the low ground. His paws told him first. Snow no longer rang sharply when he stepped. It sighed. The sound was subtle, almost imagined, but it meant compression rather than resistance. Heat had begun to move upward again, pulled from the earth and trapped beneath the ice where water never truly slept. He slowed automatically. This was no longer a place to test. He followed the rill at a distance, parallel but alert, watching how the snow behaved above it, where it sagged microscopically under its own weight, where the surface dulled instead of reflecting light cleanly, where the land seemed to hesitate. At one point, a section collapsed. Not dramatically. A soft inward drop, no louder than a hand pressing into wet cloth. Snow folded, ice gave way, and dark water appeared briefly before slush closed again over the wound. The sound barely carried, but the meaning was clear. The surface had stopped negotiating. The coyote stood still and watched. Water flowed faster now, freed by loosened ice, carrying away fragments of snow and thin sheets of frozen skin. The rill widened slightly, reshaping itself with quiet confidence. It no longer needed to pretend to be solid. This was the phase that punished habit. Animals that had crossed safely in the morning would return and trust memory instead of present truth. Hooves would punch through, paws would slip. Momentum would turn small mistakes into cold traps. The coyote did not approach. He backed away without urgency, increasing distance one careful step at a time. His hunger was present, but not commanding. Hunger could wait. Injury could not. He turned upslope, choosing a route that curved around the meadow entirely, following higher ground where snow thinned and stone rose closer to the surface. Here, the land behaved predictably. What looked solid usually was. As evening approached, shadows returned. Cold began to press downward again, slowly, reluctantly. The rill would refreeze tonight, partially, enough to mislead, enough to look ready by morning while remembering everything it had been asked to hold that day. The coyote paused on a low rise and looked back. From here, the meadow looked calm again. Smooth, untouched. The rill had vanished completely beneath fresh settling snow. No sign of failure remained. That was the most dangerous moment of all. He turned away. Somewhere beyond the ridge, another animal would find that crossing later, lighter, heavier, faster, more confident. The ice would answer according to weight and timing, not intention. The coyote moved on into broken ground and brush where water ran openly or not at all, where surfaces did not lie in stages. He carried no lesson forward as memory, only as behavior. Ice did not break when it was weak, it broke when it was believed. The surface had sagged once, it had answered once. He had listened before it learned how to refuse.